My name is Evelyn Carter, and I spent $28,800 keeping my parents from losing their house. Every month, I sent the mortgage payment before I paid my own bills. I thought it would finally earn their respect. But even as I kept the lights on in their home, they still looked at me like I was a disappointment. My father, Walter, said I was selfish. My mother, Margaret, called me dramatic. And my brother, Ryan, the golden child who never sent a cent, was their pride. This Thanksgiving, it all fell apart. The insults, the entitlement, the final moment when my father stood up in my own dining room and screamed that I was no longer family. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be rejected by the people you sacrificed everything for? This is the story of how I stopped buying love that was never real. Growing up in the Carter household taught me one lesson early: nothing I did would ever be enough. My father, Walter, believed second place was the same as failure. He'd stand over my science fair ribbons shaking his head saying, "You should have tried harder." My mother, Margaret, didn't criticize out loud. She just looked past me like I wasn't even there. When I brought home straight A's, she'd flip through her magazine and mumble, "That's nice, Evelyn." Meanwhile, Ryan was always the center of her attention. When he scored a touchdown at 7, she cried with pride. If he got a C in math, she called it focusing on what matters. I could have cured cancer, and she would have asked if Ryan needed help with his homework. That quiet neglect shaped me more than any harsh word. It taught me love was conditional and I'd have to earn every scrap. I learned to survive by proving my worth over and over. In high school, I joined every club, won every award, and tried to pretend it mattered to them. When I was named valedictorian, my father just sighed and asked why I hadn't gotten a full scholarship. Margaret didn't even come to the ceremony. She said Ryan had an important football scrimmage and someone needed to be there to cheer him on. So I walked across that stage alone, clutching my diploma like it was armor. Afterward, I waited by the exit, watching other parents hug their children. No one came for me. That was the day I decided I'd stop hoping for their approval. But deep down, part of me still believed if I worked hard enough, if I succeeded enough, someday they'd see me. Someday I'd finally be enough for them. When I left for college, it felt like escaping a cage I'd never deserved to be locked inside. Harvard was my chance to build a life where no one could question my value. I majored in economics and minored in computer science. Every semester, I made the dean's list. I paid my own tuition through scholarships and part-time jobs. While other students went home on weekends, I stayed in my dorm studying late into the night. It wasn't just ambition driving me, it was the fear that if I slowed down, all the old doubts would catch me again. On graduation day, no one from my family came. Ryan had moved to Chicago by then. Margaret said travel was too expensive. Walter didn't even call. I told myself it didn't matter, but when I stood alone in my cap and gown, I felt that old hollow ache. After graduation, I accepted an offer at Hamilton and Brooks, one of Boston's top financial firms. My salary was more than I ever dreamed earning. I rented a small apartment downtown, bought my first car, and started to believe I had finally left the past behind. I worked 12-hour days, determined to prove I belonged there. My clients trusted me with their life savings. My managers praised my focus. In those early years, I felt almost whole. But holidays were the hardest. Every Thanksgiving and Christmas, I'd drive back to my hometown carrying expensive gifts in a cautious hope that this time might be different. I told myself maybe success would make them proud. Maybe they'd see I wasn't the disappointment they claimed. But each visit ended the same way, with me driving home alone, more tired than before, wondering why I kept trying. 3 years ago, my phone rang late on a Tuesday evening. Seeing my father's name on the screen made my chest tighten. Walter never called without a reason. His voice was strained, almost embarrassed. He told me he'd been laid off from the factory after 20 years. Margaret's part-time library job couldn't cover the bills. The mortgage was 3 months behind. They were days away from losing the house. As he spoke, I felt a wave of old resentment and something I hated to admit, pity. Despite everything, I couldn't stand the thought of them losing their home. By the time he hung up, I had already decided I would help them, just until they got back on their feet. I didn't know that moment would set in motion the hardest lesson of my life, a lesson about where generosity ends and self-respect begins. The next morning, I called the bank and arranged to cover the overdue mortgage. $4,800 cleared from my account in one transaction. Margaret's voice shook when I told her. She thanked me, but it felt rehearsed, like she was reading lines she barely believed. Walter didn't say much at all. I promised myself this was temporary. A few months of help until Dad found steady work, just a bridge to keep them safe. But then came the utility bills, the car insurance, the groceries. Every time they fell short, I stepped in. I told myself it was the right thing, the decent thing. Each payment felt like a thread, tying me back to a life I'd tried to escape. I ignored the dread in my stomach, the whisper that this wouldn't end the way I hoped. After 6 months of sending money, I realized I was spending more on their expenses than my own. The commute for holiday visits was exhausting, and part of me thought maybe being nearby would help mend things. So I packed up my Boston apartment and moved back to my hometown. I found a modest rental 15 minutes from their house. Margaret said she was glad I'd be closer. Walter just nodded. Ryan didn't call at all. I tried to believe proximity might finally bring us closer. Maybe if they saw how hard I worked to keep them afloat, they'd understand how much I cared. But deep down, I already knew. It wasn't about distance. It was about something in them I could never reach, no matter how near I stood. Days turned into months. Months became years. For 3 full years, I paid their $1,600 mortgage without fail. Another $800 covered everything else. Electricity, water, insurance, groceries. $2, $400 every month. $28, $800 by the end. Money I could have saved for my own future. Money I gave because I thought family meant sacrifice. But nothing changed. Walter still criticized my choices. Margaret still compared me to Ryan, who never sent a dime but remained their perfect child. When I was promoted again at work, I called to share the news. Margaret said, "That's nice, dear," before changing the subject to Ryan's new girlfriend. I hung up and stared at the wall. I finally understood no success would ever be enough to make them see me. Part 10. The Thanksgiving Plan. Last year, I decided Thanksgiving would be different. I had just moved into a place with a proper dining room. I thought maybe hosting would show them how far I'd come. I planned everything down to the smallest detail. Bourbon glazed ham for Walter, sweet potato casserole for Margaret, Ryan's favorite craft beer. I spent nearly $350 on groceries, determined to create a meal they'd remember. As I loaded the bags into my car, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time they'd see my effort. Maybe they'd finally say they were proud. But in the back of my mind, another voice whispered the truth. When have they ever? I ignored it. I wanted so badly for this dinner to be the moment everything changed. Thanksgiving morning, I was up before dawn. My kitchen smelled of rosemary and butter. The turkey was brining vegetables, chopped pies cooling on the counter. I set the table with my best dishes. Crystal glasses I'd saved for a special occasion. The chandelier above the table was the only heirloom. I had my grandmother's light I'd claimed when no one else wanted it. As I worked, old memories crowded in. Other Thanksgivings where my efforts went unnoticed. Years when Ryan's football games mattered more than any meal I prepared. But this year felt different. I told myself I was older, stronger, less desperate for approval. Still, when I glanced at the clock counting down the hours until they arrived, my hands were already trembling. At 11:30, the doorbell rang. My heart thumped against my ribs as I wiped my hands on a towel. Margaret walked in first, carrying a store-bought pumpkin pie. She glanced around and said, "The table looks nice, but wouldn't blue plates be warmer?" I swallowed the urge to argue. "Thanks for the pie, Mom." She peered into the kitchen, frowning at the turkey. "You're not using my recipe? You know how your father feels about experiments." "It's brined," I explained, forcing a calm tone. "It should stay moist." Margaret sighed and settled on the couch with her wine. 15 minutes later, Ryan arrived empty-handed as always. His girlfriend, Claire, followed behind, holding a bouquet of yellow roses. "These are beautiful," I told her, grateful for the gesture. Claire smiled gently. Ryan was already hugging Mom, soaking in her adoration. At 12:45, Walter walked in carrying a 6-pack of cheap beer. He didn't look around or comment on the decorations. He just grunted. "Place is hard to find. You should give better directions. I texted them yesterday," I reminded him. Voice low. He gave me a stiff hug that ended almost before it began. "Smells good." I guess he added as if complimenting me cost him something. As I returned to the kitchen, I heard him in the living room. "Evelyn's going all fancy, trying to impress someone with her Boston money." Margaret's reply was soft. "Walter, please." But there was no conviction in it. I gripped the countertop so hard my knuckles ached. All my careful planning, all the money, the effort still just something to mock. And dinner hadn't even started yet. I tried to focus on the food. The turkey needed one last basting. The stuffing was warming in the oven. Everything was almost ready. Ryan wandered into the kitchen, phone in hand. He didn't notice the tension hanging in the air. "Hey, got any Budweiser?" "No," I said, my voice flat. "I bought that craft IPA you said you liked." He shrugged. "Dad thinks that fancy stuff is just for show." I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. "Take whatever you want," I finally managed. As he rummaged in the fridge, I checked the turkey again. The skin was golden perfect. At least something had turned out the way I planned. For a moment, I closed my eyes and tried to remember why I thought this dinner would fix anything. At exactly 1 o'clock, I called everyone to the table. My voice sounded too bright, too hopeful. They took their seats, Walter at one end, Ryan and Claire on one side, Margaret across from me. The platters looked like a magazine spread: herb-roasted turkey, bourbon-glazed ham, 3 kinds of potatoes. Walter frowned immediately. "Where's the stuffing?" I pointed to the dish by his plate. "Cornbread stuffing with sausage and apples." He poked it like it might bite him. "Doesn't look like your mother's." My throat tightened. "Let's say grace," he announced, reaching for Margaret's and Ryan's hands. His voice filled the room. "Lord, we thank you for this food and for bringing our family together. We're grateful for Ryan's success and for Claire joining us." That was it. No mention of me, no thanks for the meal or the roof over their heads. Just the same quiet erasure I'd known my whole life. I kept my eyes closed a moment longer, pretending to pray. Really, I was swallowing the disbelief that still managed to surprise me. When I looked up, Claire was watching me. Her expression held something like pity and understanding. She offered a small smile. "The turkey looks perfect, Evelyn," she said gently. "Yes, not bad," Margaret added in that detached tone she always used, though I usually leave it in longer. "It's fully cooked," Claire insisted, cutting into her slice. "Moist and beautiful." For a second, I felt seen. Just a flicker. Walter was already piling his plate with ham, ignoring the turkey completely. Ryan cracked open another beer, shifting the talk back to football. I ate in silence, surrounded by people who never really noticed me, even when everything in the room was something I'd given. Halfway through the meal, Claire turned to me. "How's work, Evelyn?" Her voice was warm, the first genuine question of the day. I opened my mouth to answer, but Margaret cut in. "She's still at that finance place, always working too much." She turned to Ryan. "Nothing like your job. You get to meet all those interesting people." I set my fork down. Actually, I was promoted to senior investment strategist last month. I manage over $300 million now. Claire's eyes widened. "That's incredible." Walter snorted. "Numbers on a screen, not real work." Heat rose in my cheeks. "My work matters, Dad. Those numbers are people's savings, their futures." He shrugged. "Sure, but you're always complaining about helping us out. Like we should be grateful." The room went still. Even Ryan looked up from his plate, uneasy. My voice came out quiet. "When have I ever complained about helping Walter stabbed at his ham? Your mother said you mentioned the mortgage again, acting like you're some kind of savior." I turned to Margaret, who was suddenly studying her plate. "I only said I needed to transfer funds before the holiday." "That's it." Walter shook his head. "There you go, money, money, money. You think you're better than us because you write a few checks." My hands trembled. "A few checks, I've covered your bills for 3 years." He slammed his palm on the table. "Dishes rattled. You want a medal? Fine, thank you, Evelyn. Happy now?" Something inside me cracked. I looked at him, my voice steady but cold. "No, I don't want a medal. I wanted a father who didn't treat me like I was never enough." Walter's face turned red. "That's enough. I won't be disrespected in my own family." I swallowed hard. "Disrespected? You mean because I finally told the truth?" Margaret's eyes flashed. "You're just jealous of your brother. You always have been." I laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Jealous of what? That he does nothing and you adore him?" Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we should all calm down." "No," I said, my voice rising. "I'm done pretending this is normal." Walter pushed back his chair so hard it tipped over. "Get out," he shouted. "Get out of this house!" I stood, heart pounding. "This is my apartment, the one I pay for, just like I pay for yours." He glared at me, breathing hard. Not anymore, you don't. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I looked at each of them. Walter's clenched jaw, Margaret's watery eyes, Ryan staring at the floor. You're right, I said finally, my voice low. Not anymore. Walter blinked. What's that supposed to mean? It means the mortgage payment stopped today? The utilities? Everything? Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Evelyn, don't be cruel. Cruel. I shook my head slowly. Cruel is watching your daughter sacrifice her life to keep you comfortable while you treat her like a burden. Ryan whispered. Ev, come on. No, I said, feeling something calm and final settle in my chest. This isn't love. It never was. I walked to the door and opened it. Dinner's over. Please leave. Nobody moved at first. Walter looked stunned as if he couldn't process that I'd finally said no. Margaret's voice cracked. Evelyn, don't do this. We're your family. Family doesn't mean endless debt, I said softly. Family doesn't mean being nothing, so you can feel like something. Walter's jaw tightened. You'll regret this. Maybe, I admitted, but not tonight. Ryan stood, eyes darting between us. Come on, Dad, let's just go. Margaret hesitated, searching my face for any sign I'd changed my mind. I looked away. One by one, they walked past me into the cold night. Claire was last. She paused, her hand brushing my arm. I'm sorry, she whispered. You deserve better. When the door clicked shut, I locked it and stood in the silence, the weight of years finally lifting. I leaned against the door, my breath coming in short, shaky bursts. The dining table was still covered in untouched food. Wine glasses half full, plates abandoned mid-bite. All that effort, all those years of trying, for what I moved slowly around the table, picking up dishes, wrapping leftovers. My hands felt numb. When everything was packed away, I stood in the quiet kitchen and pressed my palm to the cool countertop. This was supposed to be the night everything changed, and it was, but not the way I'd hoped. Instead of earning their love, I had finally accepted that it wasn't something I could buy. I turned off the lights room by room until only the chandelier glowed over the empty table. Then I picked up my keys and stepped into the night, needing air that didn't feel so heavy. I drove without a destination, headlights sweeping over quiet houses and dark storefronts. Each familiar street carried a memory I didn't want. The high school where I gave my valedictorian speech to an audience that barely clapped. The park where Walter taught Ryan to throw a football but never came to watch my debate competitions. The library where Margaret worked and displayed Ryan's photos, but never my awards. The farther I drove, the clearer it became no amount of success had ever changed how they saw me. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, a message from Janet, my oldest friend. Thinking of you. You don't have to face this alone. I gripped the wheel harder, fighting the tears that finally broke through. For the first time in my life, I realized leaving them behind might be the only way to save myself. I pulled into an empty parking lot, engine idling. My hands trembled as I picked up my phone and called Janet. She answered on the first ring. Evelyn. My voice cracked. They left. I told them to go, and they actually left. Good, she said gently. You finally drew the line. It doesn't feel good, I whispered. It feels like I burned the last bridge I had. No, Janet said firmly. They were the ones who kept setting that bridge on fire. You just stopped trying to rebuild it. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, breathing in the cold air from the vents. What if this is it? What if they never speak to me again? Then you'll still be okay, she said, because you're finally free. A long silence stretched between us, soft and steady. For the first time, I believed she might be right. I stayed in that parking lot for over an hour, watching my breath fog the windshield. My mind kept replaying every moment of the dinner, Walter's anger, Margaret's cold disappointment, Ryan's uneasy silence. I thought about all the times I'd bent over backward to keep the peace, all the money I'd sent without question, all the holidays I'd ruined trying to earn what they'd never give. Something shifted inside me, a quiet understanding. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself to keep them comfortable. I turned the key in the ignition, feeling strangely calm. Tonight I would go home. Tomorrow I would start untangling my life from theirs, one payment, one obligation at a time. I deserved to be more than a wallet. I deserved to be seen. Back at my apartment, the silence felt different. Less like emptiness, more like space I could finally claim. I poured a glass of water and sat at my desk opening my laptop. My hands hovered over the keyboard. Then one by one I logged into every account tied to their bills. The mortgage, the utilities, the insurance. Each cancellation form asked, "Are you sure?" I clicked, yes. Every time. When I finished, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. For years, I'd believed cutting them off would make me cruel, but in that moment, it felt like telling the truth for the first time. I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. My heart was still beating fast, but for once, it wasn't from fear. I knew I needed to protect myself in case they tried to twist the story, so I opened a new email draft to David Reed, my family lawyer. Subject: termination of financial support. I typed slowly, choosing every word with care. David, I am writing to formally document that as of today, I am ending all financial support to Walter and Margaret Carter. For the past 3 years, I have covered their mortgage and various household expenses voluntarily. There was never a contract, and I have no legal obligation to continue. Please keep this record in case of any future disputes. I read it twice, my throat tight, then pressed send. It felt final in a way nothing else had. When the confirmation appeared, I exhaled, feeling the first hint of peace I'd known in years. By morning, my phone was buzzing nonstop. 3 missed calls from Walter, 2 voicemails from Margaret, a text from Ryan. They're freaking out. What happened? I didn't answer. I couldn't. When I checked my email, David had already replied. Evelyn, you are correct that you have no obligation to continue payments. If they attempt any legal action, please let me know immediately. Document everything. His calm words steadied me. Around noon, the mortgage company called to confirm the cancellation. The woman on the line sounded almost apologetic. They'll need to set up a new payment method within 30 days. Understood, I said. After I hung up, I turned off my phone and set it face down. I knew the backlash was only beginning, but for the first time, I didn't feel trapped by it. The next morning at work, I tried to focus on my portfolio reports, but my stomach tightened when Diane, our receptionist, called my extension. Evelyn, your parents are here. They don't have an appointment, but they insist it's urgent. My heart thudded so hard I felt it in my throat. Please, tell them I'm in meetings all day, I said, my voice steady. If they refuse to leave, call security. I pause. Are you sure? I'm sure. 20 minutes later, Monica, my boss, knocked softly on my door. Security escorted them out, she said gently. Do you need to go home? I swallowed hard. No, I need to be here. Monica nodded. Then you have my support. After she left, I closed my eyes and let out a shaky breath. I was finally choosing where my boundaries began and theirs ended. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Ryan. They told me you stopped paying everything. Is that true? I stared at the screen, feeling the old guilt try to crawl back in. I typed slowly. Yes. I'm done being the only one sacrificing. A long pause. Then his reply, but what about their mortgage? They'll lose the house. I kept them afloat for 3 years, Ryan. Maybe it's time someone else stepped up. Another silence. You know I can't afford it. Then they'll have to figure something out, like adults. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. This was the moment I finally understood letting go didn't make me heartless. It made me free. By evening, the calls and texts had multiplied. Aunt Deborah left a voicemail, her voice dripping with judgment. I can't believe you do this to your own parents. They gave you everything. I deleted it without listening to the rest. Another text came from my cousin Karen. Everyone is saying you abandoned them, that you're having some kind of breakdown. I took a steady breath and typed back. I supported them alone for 3 years. I'm not having a breakdown. I'm finally setting boundaries. No reply. For years, I'd feared this being painted as the villain, but sitting there in my quiet living room, I felt something close to relief. If telling the truth made me the villain in their story, I could live with that. Because for once, I was finally living by my own rules. 2 days later, I came home from work to find Walter's old blue sedan parked in front of my building. My stomach dropped. I circled the block twice, hoping he would leave. When I came back, the car was still there. I parked a street over and walked the long way around, heart thudding. When I finally reached my door, I found a note taped to it in Walter's shaky handwriting. Come home and talk. We are still your family. I tore it down and crumpled it in my fist. Inside, I locked every bolt and drew the curtains. My phone lit up with missed calls. I silenced it without reading the messages. I stood there in the dark, breathing slowly, letting the quiet wrap around me. They could park outside all night, but I wasn't opening that door again. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something made me answer. "Hello," a quiet voice replied. "Evelyn, it's Claire." I sank into a chair. "Is everything okay?" "Not really. I thought you should know your parents showed up at your apartment this afternoon. Your neighbor called the police." My throat went dry. "They tried to get inside, yes. Walter told the officer he had a right to enter because he's your father." I closed my eyes, pressing a hand to my forehead. "Thank you for telling me." Claire hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. No one deserves to be treated the way they treat you." When we hung up, I felt shaken, but underneath a small, steady certainty was growing stronger. I wasn't going back. The next morning, I called the local police station. My voice was calm, even though my heart thumped hard. "I need to file a report about an attempted entry to my apartment," I explained. "They're my parents, but I don't feel safe." The officer listened without judgment. "We'll add extra patrols around your building. If they come back and try to enter, call 911 immediately." After I hung up, I felt the first real sense of protection in weeks. I spent the rest of the day changing my locks and updating the security system. Each click of a new password felt like reclaiming part of my life. By evening, I was exhausted, but for the first time, the exhaustion didn't come from fear or shame. It came from standing up for myself and knowing I wouldn't back down. 2 days later, I stopped at the grocery store near my apartment. I thought it was safe far enough from their house. I was wrong. I turned into the produce aisle and nearly collided with Margaret. Her hair was unkempt, her eyes red. "Evelyn," she said, blocking my cart, "how could you do this to us?" I kept my voice steady. "Please move. This isn't the place." "You've destroyed this family," she hissed. "Your father can't sleep. I'm sick with worry." People were starting to stare. "Move, Mom. You always were selfish," she said louder now. "Always thought you were better." My hand shook as I left my cart behind and walked out the automatic doors. In the parking lot, I finally let my tears fall, but even then, I didn't turn back. By that evening, the confrontation was online. Someone had filmed Margaret shouting in the store. The video showed me walking away, face pale, eyes down. "Ungrateful daughter humiliates her mother," read the caption. My phone exploded with messages, some sympathetic, some cruel. I closed every app and sat on the couch staring at the blank wall. A text came from Janet. "Ignore them. Anyone who matters knows the truth." I wiped my face and took a slow breath. Let them talk. Let them twist the story however they needed to feel better. I wasn't going to explain myself to strangers. For the first time, their shame wasn't my burden to carry. A week later, Ryan called. His voice sounded tired. "Mom asked me to give you something," he said. "A letter." I hesitated. "I'm not sure I want it." "I understand," he said quietly, "but maybe read it when you're ready." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope in my hand. My name was written in Margaret's careful script. I told myself I'd throw it away, but curiosity won. Inside were 2 pages. No blame, no excuses. Just her small, shaky handwriting. "I see it now," she wrote. "I favored Ryan because he was easy to love. You were demanding because you wanted more than I knew how to give. I was wrong. I'm sorry." I read it twice, my chest tight. It wasn't everything, but it was more than I ever expected. I brought the letter to my next session with Dr. Simmons. She read it slowly, then looked up at me. "How does it feel to hear her say those words?" I searched for an answer. "Strange," I admitted. Part of me wants to believe it changes everything. Another part knows it doesn't. Dr. Simmons nodded. "An apology can be real and still not erase years of pain." I folded the letter carefully. "I don't know if I want a relationship with her," I said. "I just needed to hear her say it." "That's enough," she told me gently. "You don't have to decide anything else right now." I slipped the letter back into my bag. For the first time, I felt like I held the power to choose what happened next. In the weeks that followed, the calls slowed. The messages thinned out. Ryan and I began meeting for coffee, cautious but honest. He admitted he'd never really seen how different our childhoods were. "You deserved better," he told me one afternoon. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you." I nodded, feeling a quiet acceptance. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Margaret and Walter moved in with Aunt Deborah. The house went into foreclosure like I knew it would. I didn't feel triumph, just a soft relief that their problems were no longer mine to solve. Most nights I cooked dinner in my quiet apartment, the same one Walter once tried to throw me out of. Each evening felt like a small declaration I'm allowed to have peace, even if they never understand why. Spring came early that year. On a warm April evening, I stood by my window watching the trees bud new leaves. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed love had to be earned with sacrifice. The one who kept paying and pleasing, hoping it would be enough. She deserved compassion, not shame. She did the best she could. I still didn't know if I'd ever reconcile with my parents. But I knew one thing for certain, I wasn't going back to the person I was before. Closing my eyes, I let a deep breath fill my chest. If you've ever felt like you had to buy your worth, I hope my story shows you another way. Family doesn't get to define your value. You do. If this resonated with you, share your story in the comments. You're not alone anymore.